Assistant Professor of Mental Health Law and Policy in the College of Behavioral and Community Sciences at the University of South Florida. I'm also the Director of the Stigma Action Research Lab at the University of South Florida. And I'm here today to share with you a panel presentation, which I will be moderating, titled The Power of Peer Support. So I am joined by three guests who I have had the pleasure of becoming acquainted with over the course of the past, I'd say, year or so. The first guest is Colleen Danielson, who is a certified recovery peer specialist with the veteran designation. Nancy Jones, who is also a certified recovery peer specialist with a veteran designation. And David Knar, who is a certified peer specialist. So we're going to have a conversation about peer support today. I have a list of questions prepared. Thank you all so much for joining me and for sharing with our viewers your wisdom on this topic. So first of all, just to back up a step, I mentioned these two titles a moment ago, the Certified Recovery Peer Specialist with the veteran designation, and then a Certified Peer Specialist. David was chatting with us right before we started this panel discussion, and could you just share quickly, David, what the difference in these designations are?
Sure, thank you. It really boils down to where, as far as the state or entity by which you've received your certification. So for myself, I received peer support training back in 2006 in Georgia. And so at that time, their designation was a certified peer specialist. In Florida, for Nancy and Colleen's case, they were certified by the state of Florida through the Florida Certification Board. And they have different designations, one of which is veteran.
Great, thank you so much. That was very helpful. So we are here today to talk about peer support, and one way that you can deliver peer support is by becoming a certified peer specialist, or whatever the title is in your specific state. But before we get into, certifications, and, one thing I failed to share earlier is that Colleen, Nancy, and David are all working with veterans at James A. Haley Veterans Hospital here in Tampa, Florida. So the first question I had for you all, and I'd be interested in input from all three of you or one of you, whoever feels like they could speak to this, is can you define for the audience what peer support is?
Well, the way I see it, peer support is where we are individuals that, as the title says, we are peers with the person we're working with. We have lived experience, which means we have gone through our own recovery or mental health recovery and are still maintaining our recovery. So with the hopes that through our experience, we can provide hope and understanding and create a good dialogue with the peer that we are working with. In our case, we're peer specialists at the VA, so to be that, we are all veterans.
Great. So it's really about that shared lived experience coming from a place that in some respects, what the other might be going through.
Mm-hmm.
We can never, ever have a perfect picture of what it is like to walk in someone else's shoes, right? But even if you can connect on some level with regard to your experiences, that can be really helpful. Did Colleen or David, do you want to add anything to what Nancy just gave us? Sure, Colleen, go for it.
I'll just say that in addition to everything that Nancy said, which is 100% on, sometimes we can be, and oftentimes we can be a bridge between the veteran and a provider and even a family member, because as being veterans ourselves and having that lived experience, they may open up to us and see our reaction or, acceptance. And, so they may choose at that point, after opening up in a safe environment, that they have the courage to open up to their provider or to a family member. So it's really a very unique service that we provide.
I would just like to add that within the context, first off, I agree with Colleen. Everything that Nancy and what Colleen just added is spot on. I would just add the one piece that if we're talking about peer support specialists or peer specialists that are actually working, we've been trained to utilize our recovery story in very strategic ways. And ultimately it's to provide the hope that recovery is available for that individual. And I think that training of using our recovery story is really important, because when we interact with veterans, because we all work for the VA, it's not about us. We don't direct anything. We're listening to the veteran and using our story, our recovery journey, very strategically at certain points to support the movement that individual is trying to, the path they're on as they're moving in their own recovery, whether it's from substance use, mental health, or both. And I think that's an important piece in addition to what's already been added.
Thank you. Yes, we're putting all three of those contributions together, I think that's a great definition of peer support. And you spoke just a second ago, David, to some of the professional issues around peer support. The fact that this is a certification, it's a designation, it's a professional position. And we come up against a little bit of challenges regarding how the peer support role is viewed in different settings. And so it's really, really critical that we recognize this as a professional designation. So I love that you just said that. So, we've been kind of dancing around with this. We've mentioned this, we've said lived experience, having shared experiences. But what is it about lived experience that you think is so important? Maybe we can start off with Colleen this time.
Sure. To me, it's a way to build rapport and eventually trust. And it also allows them to know that they're not alone. So, very important piece.
Great. David or Nancy, would you add anything to what is so important about the lived experience piece here? Why is it different having somebody that identifies as living with a mental health condition as a peer providing support than it would be, a clinician that doesn't identify in that way?
My thought is that really there's so much stigma out there in our society. I mean, I don't care where it is, whether it's within your own family, whether it's out in the neighborhood, in the workplace, just out in social gatherings. There's so much stigma towards mental health. To be able to connect with somebody that has been on that path, although it might be different, it's still similar. There are points of intersection. Same thing that I can't speak for Nancy or Colleen, but I know for myself, when I'm first interacting with a veteran, one of the first things I say is that I'm a veteran. And it just seems immediately to kind of level the field, irregardless of when we served, how we served, where we served. There is a common element. And then when I can add that additional piece at some point that I'm in recovery from mental health, it really, there's these points of intersection, which I think brings comfort. And just to add to what Colleen said, that element of trust that gets created. And it's very interesting because we are able to build a different relationship than, say, what a provider is able to build. I always say it like this: the provider who is trained and has an important role in recovery, their currency, if you will, of treatment is generally things like evidence-based treatment and things like that, where our currency is us. our lived experience.
Love that. I love that so much. It's a wonderful way of looking at it. Nancy, would you add anything in addition?
Oh, I agree totally with both of them. I think having someone that you can talk to does help break the stigma. You have someone who is willing to tell their story. Even as we say, we strategically tell parts of our story as it applies to it. And hearing someone who's willing to tell it and show how you're advancing and how well you do with it, deal with everything, gives a feeling of hope that maybe that's a future for me. A lot of times when, especially when I was going through things, it's hard to see a positive future.
Yeah.
And even talking to a therapist, which is marvelous, it's a big help. It helped me immensely. I got a lot of support from people who had similar or the same experiences. And that bonding gives you a strong link to what I feel was a positive future.
Yeah. Hope is so important, and knowing you're not alone is also so important. Something was said just a moment ago that I think is really interesting and important as well. And that is, you identify yourself as, David, you said, a veteran, and that brings this connection between you and the individual. Or you identify yourself as being in recovery from a mental health condition, right? And I think why that's so important is because those identities are what we call concealable identities. We can choose to share them, or we can choose, for the most part, to keep them to ourselves. But when we do share them with a professional designation, that has a lot of power. Yeah. Nancy, you have some additional lived experience. I'm wondering if you'd be willing to comment on that as well. We were talking earlier about some of the projects you're taking on right now. I think it applies here, right? Because all of these identities that we're talking about are ones that we can either choose to conceal, or we can choose to share and use to, empower others and build that rapport in those relationships.
Yes, well, I feel we all have multiple identities within us. All people do. I have one that's fairly obvious. I am a transgender woman. And I know as I was going through, I felt very alone. This, not just the stigma, but when I was growing up, there was no such thing as transgender.
Yeah.
At least known. We have existed for millennia, but known. By talking to me sometimes, I become the first person that a veteran will come out to. They won't even come out to their provider or anything because of the intimidation. And I like to bring a lot of resources together, not just me. I'm a conduit for other resources as well, so that they see that not only is it me, but there is a community that we can be part of. Just like veterans like to talk to veterans because we feel we understand each other more. Transgender like to talk to transgender. Women like to talk to women. There's so many connections that come from being part of a community. And that's what a lot of being peer specialists are, because not only are we trained, we are part of the community, and we let people know we are one of them and they are one of us.
I love it. What better feeling than to feel welcomed and like you're in a safe place? I think that's the terminology you used earlier too, Colleen, is it's a safe place. Amazing. And that right there is stigma busting. Is there anything else that any of you would like to share about why lived experience is so important before I ask another question of you?
I'd just like to add one other piece, and that is that, and I'll just use my own experience. When I first was exposed to the idea of recovery, that was the most far-fetched idea that I had ever heard in my entire life. I literally, so we are going back a long time, a long time ago. but I was part of a product of still a very paternalistic, if you will, mental health system, which was take your medicine. This is what you're always going to be. And if you bucked that in any way, you were seen as non-compliant, you know, whatever, all these different terms. So when my doctor actually mentioned recovery to me, I thought it was a trick question. I thought they were trying to see where I was at, if I was going to be a good, you know, a good patient, if you will. And it was totally foreign. So I think that what I have discovered was that lived experience, oftentimes, if you're not at that place yourself, knowing that somebody else has lived it and made it into recovery. I think it's Patricia Deegan who referred to it as the fragile flame of hope. And it's so very true. So that's where I also think lived experience is important.
Oh,
Mhm.
citing one of my idols. I just love her work. And yeah, it is Pat Deegan who said that. Amazing. Thank you. I'm so glad that you added that. So we've used this terminology about certification and peer specialist or certified recovery peer specialist. Can you all tell me a bit about what led you to become a peer specialist? What was it that inspired that for you?
I'll go. So many, I lived many, many years with mental health disease that I was too fearful to get diagnosed due to the stigma of people around me, my family, and just fear. I mean, my fears were so unrealistic. I thought that if I went to get mental health treatment, they would take my children away from me. That's how fearful I was. And there's really foolish talk out there. So when I finally decided that there was so much chaos in my life and that I needed to get help, and things started to make sense in my world. And I worked and did other things, and I learned about this. And when I learned about this, I thought, how could that possibly even be a job? Because it sounds like a dream to me, to be able to talk. But there was one part that, I thought, well, now I have to tell everyone. And, you know, for a short time, not very long, I thought about it, and it kind of held me back, but not long. I realized just how important it was and what I went through and all those fears. And I knew that if I felt like that, there were many, many other people feeling that way. And if I could just share with them what I have been through and let them know that, they don't have to live that way, they have a choice, then it will be worth it. And it has been worth it.
Oh, love that. Absolutely. Nancy, you're shaking your head. You agree?
Yeah, I agree totally. My background is so far away from mental health. It's wild. But going through the different phases of my recovery, and there is more than one, I had support. I had people there to talk to help me, to guide me, and found that helped me. It gave me a voice to start talking about myself. I've never really wanted to talk about myself. I always wanted to hide. And it gave me a voice, hearing them that they have gone through this. They've gone through addiction. They've gone through depressions or whatever. And I was thinking that if I could help just one person understand the same thing, that they have a voice. They just have to learn what their voice is. And a lot of times we lie to ourselves for so much that to hear someone tell their own truth becomes very important to another person. I like to consider that I'm a voice for the voiceless until they learn to use their own voice. Because someone has to talk, and you have to talk about these things. And it's hard for us to start talking as people because of stigma, because of how we are. In the Air Force, no one wanted to talk about anything mental health whatsoever because of our clearances.
Yeah.
We were afraid of losing our clearances, and it put that stigma on us. Now I've got a chance to talk to people, connect, and show that you can talk about yourself and how you can talk about yourself. You don't have to lay out your entire life. You know, you can lay it out when it's appropriate and how it's appropriate, and give hope.
Stephen, how about you? What was it that brought you to this world?
Well, for me, it's really simple. It's 3 words: pay it forward. It really is that, because very shortly, I was the guy that, well, I shouldn't be here today. Let's just put it that way. I really shouldn't. I was the one who was, at a certain point, I was in a long-term psychiatric hospital, strapped to the chair out in the hallway, drooling on himself. So that was me. If I wasn't there, I was in the quiet room. And my family had been told to move on. My wife had been encouraged by professionals to get a divorce. My parents had been told that I would never come out, because when you get that final diagnosis of acute and chronic schizophrenia, there isn't usually any hope for most people. And I certainly had no hope for myself, but just some paths crossed. I ended up with a very forward thinking psychiatrist and psychiatric nurse practitioner who on a Friday brought me a stack of papers, and they knew I loved to read, believe it or not, scientific studies, just a weird way my brain worked. And they handed it to me and they said, we'll talk about this on Monday. And it was all about recovery. And as I said, I literally thought it was a test, that they were testing me. And on Monday, they pulled up their chairs next to my rack and said, what do you think? And I said, is that real? And they said, it is. And we think that you can recover. And I was like, you've got to be kidding me. And so began the path. So the fact that I'm able to be here today to even have a rational conversation with somebody is beyond anything that I ever thought was possible. So it's all about paying it forward.
Wow. Sorry. That is it's a powerful panel discussion when your moderator is crying. That's amazing. That is amazing. And there's a message there. Some of the people who will view this panel discussion may not identify in a way that would allow them to be a peer specialist, right? But they might find themselves in other places in the behavioral health care field where they're providing care, they're working alongside peer specialists. And your stories are the types of stories that we need to hear to build that hope. Incredible. Wow. Thank you all so much. Okay, so now moving on to a little bit more practical of a question. Could you tell me a little bit about the kinds of competencies or abilities and skill sets that people need to have in order to make a good peer support specialist? Maybe.
So I think
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Right.
I think I'll answer that one first and then hear from the rest. I think number one is you've got to be willing to identify yourself as someone in recovery, and that is not easy. To me, that's what the most important competency is, to be able to identify.
Yep, and you're right. You're so right. There's whole programs. We've done some work together for some context on a program called Honest, Open, Proud, or Up to Me, which is about weighing the pros and the cons around disclosure, right? Mm-hmm. So it's not a straightforward decision. It is definitely one that has to be grappled with because stigma exists. And there are some risks. But I'm certainly so grateful that the three of you have made the decision to identify in that way so that others can get hope and support from you. Great answer. Colleen or Nancy, any other competencies that you think are really important?
I wrote down a few that I think are really important, like having appropriate social skills, of course. I mean, we want to be seen as professionals, you know, which, keeping your word, making sure that people can trust us. If we say we're going to do something, we have to have the follow through to do it. And don't promise anything you can't deliver. Absolutely be a team player. You go and you introduce yourself and you enmesh yourself in that team. And then, as far as charting and all of our paperwork and competencies that we need to do, our trainings, always be on top of that. Never have anybody tell you you need to do that. Always be on top of that, because that's where we are, that's recovery. We take care of those things.
Absolutely. Before I ask Nancy for you to add a competency, I just want to follow up on one thing you mentioned, Colleen, and that's integrating yourself into the team. So for you in your, daily work, what does the team look like for you?
So our team is made up of psychiatrists, psychologists, social workers, licensed mental health providers. There's peer support, which is me, and our HAS clerks, which are, they are our front desk, which they are so important, of course, because they get all of our scheduling done. But I make myself available on Teams all the time. I mean, they know that if they ask me something, I'm going to answer it. I'm at those team meetings. If I have something to add, I contribute to the conversation. I let them know what I'm doing. If we start any new groups, they're aware of it so that they can refer to me. If there's something that, if I see a consult that's put in incorrectly, that's my opportunity to, have a teaching moment for the whole, for the whole group as well. So, they know that they can come to me for resources. When I find new resources, I send them out to them. So they know that I'm a part of the team. And they also know that if I'm working with, a shared veteran and there's anything that is going on during our visit, whether that veteran stopped their medication, there's something that they need to know about it, they absolutely know I am going to co-sign them on that note. I'm going to reach out to them. It's, it's a matter of, I've showed them my work ethic and my abilities, and they trust that.
Yeah, I think it's so important to remember that every member of a team has a set of competencies, roles, responsibilities, and that each one is unique and important and of equal importance too, right? So thank you. That's exactly what I was hoping that you might share with the audience. Nancy, how about you? Would you add any additional competencies?
Well, I agree with the team player. You are part of a team, and being part of a team not only means having yourself available to answer questions or to help step in if need be, but also being part of a team means being able to ask for help, realizing that I don't know everything about everything. I'm still trying to learn about myself, so we've got that. But if I don't know something, being part of the team, I know who knows it and who I can get support from and clarity from. And Colleen knows that quite well because I bug her a lot. But it's very important to be part of a group, and that goes both ways, not just providing information and support, but asking for it and being willing to receive the support and receive the directions if need be, because we all make mistakes. We all get to a point where we're confused in that. having the ability to ask someone is very important, and learning about what you can and cannot say, because parts of my recovery may not be right for them. So that's a skill too, and a competency. Learning your recovery to a point where you can say, this is irrelevant, but this isn't.
Mhm.
And knowing that I can talk to them about this, and them knowing that, as Colleen said, they trust us. Honesty is one of the biggest tools we have. They have to understand that they trust us, so that when we say we've been there, they believe it. They understand that we have, and we're not just feeding them a story or reading some declaration or anything. So honesty and trust is very important competencies. You have to build that. And like it's been said, when I start out, I do tell them what peer is. And sometimes, especially for a veteran, I'll just say, which branch and where were you stationed? A lot of times that creates a dialogue, and the dialogue can move on from there. Once a dialogue starts, it's easy to continue it.
Yeah. Wow.
I just wanted to touch on one more thing. Like Nancy said, be willing to ask for help. And that's sometimes, I have done that so often on my team. There have been times that I've been with a veteran and it's really gotten very close to my heart, and has been very, very emotional. So I need to process that. And I know, there's so many people willing to take the time to process that with me. So, that's it's wonderful, wonderful to work in this environment and have that, the ability to do that.
Colleen, a student asked me about that the other day. We were kind of having a wrap up session for the recovery course that I teach. And she was like, I can't remember exactly how she worded it, but she said something about like, how do we take care of ourselves? And I didn't even think of that as an answer, but it's a really good one. And it's make sure that you're building a supportive team within your workplace that you can go to when you have, a hard day. So that's amazing. Absolutely amazing. I love it.
Well, I think teams are important, whether it's in the workplace, and we have a great team here, but also in life, networks, having other people you can talk to,
Absolutely.
family, friends, so that you aren't just locked into these times. But when you leave, you still know that you're connected to people. And sometimes that's hard to build a network. And that's something else that we try and do, is help them reach out to others where appropriate, so that we not only have it, but I've got a network outside that is as important as the one inside the system here.
So important. And David, it looked like you were either relating to what Nancy was saying, or you might have had something to add. That is such.
I certainly could relate with both Colleen and Nancy, what they had to say. And I would just add another aspect to the idea of team is that looking at recovery as a whole, it usually, for recovery to happen for an individual, it takes more than just one piece. It's really, it ultimately, what I have found to be true is that it is a team effort. And it's easy, I think, as us as peers, having been in part product of the mental health system, to just kind of say, we've got it, we know what we're doing, and not recognizing and that the other parts are also important. And I think that's a big deal. And so to develop that relationship, to do all the things that Nancy and Colleen spoke about, that being individuals of integrity and character and follow through and all of that is really, really important in the work that we do.
And this is just a really, really important part also of being human and being a human being and with other human beings, right? These are all the qualities that we value one another. So yeah, thank you so much for that. Now that you've told us a little bit about the competencies, I think somebody mentioned earlier this idea that there is training that comes along with becoming a peer specialist or a certified recovery peer specialist. Can you tell me a little bit about what that looks like, what the content is, how long the training is, those sorts of logistical pieces?
I think Nancy should comment on this. She's the most recent.
She's the most recent. Yeah.
Been through training.
Yeah, I'm the newbie in the group. What I can talk about is the requirements for Florida.
Okay.
I have the requirement of 40 hours of in-class training.
Okay.
And the in-class training covered everything from listening.
Mm-hmm.
We don't just talk, we have to listen. And having good dialogue, to finding positives and negatives to help bring out the positive. Several different things, learning about different situations within mental health and other resources, how to find resources, how to advocate, not just for ourselves, but for our veterans, to see how we can help them, not just our story, but bringing other stuff together and teaching them to advocate for themselves is very important. There was also training in putting recovery plans together. 500 hours of basically, if you want internship, I had to work with the group and have 500 hours of experience actually working in peer support. And then, of course, there's the state test. You sit down and you have to pass the test. And then, of course, our continuing education and renewal every year so we can keep up with the latest of what's going on, the different techniques and what relates to our field as peer specialists.
That's great. What kind of continuing education opportunities do you normally see made available?
It's a wide range, trauma and conversations about trauma, conversations about what has been shown, the most recent thing, new techniques that come out, for then other evidence-based care that comes out. As new things are learned, you keep up with it. New techniques of listening and questioning to bring out, not just ask closed questions, how old are you? Boom, okay, it's over. But to ask open questions, you have to draw them out and get them thinking, and having to learn to accept silence for a while.
Yeah, that's
sometimes they need the time to think. And that can be a very hard thing to do because no one really likes the dead silence. And, learn how to actually just sit there and let them think about it.
Yeah. I mean, those are all counseling techniques that you're using, and then combining it with, having some deep understanding of some of the things that folks have gone through. I mean, that is so incredibly powerful. Now, you said, Nancy, in your answer, this is for the state of Florida. David, how does that compare with, the type of training that you received in Georgia?
So I'll just make a really quick joke. I always look at Florida's, they're kind of wimps when it comes to training on certified peer specialists. They only go for 40 hours. In Georgia, we have 80 hours of training spread over 2 weeks on site. They house you. You don't get to go anywhere, which is great though, because you get to really create some bonds. And then usually about a month to 2 months after your training, you go in for your exam. And in Georgia, it has 3 different components. There's an objective portion to the exam. There then is a subjective portion, a written essay section where different scenarios are provided and you basically explain how you would handle that. And then the last piece is probably, I think, the most intimidating. And as you go before a 4-person board and you have an oral exam to become certified. So it's really much more detailed, but in part, I will say this, there's a reason for it. Georgia was and is the first state, and I think one of the few states in the United States where peer support standalone services is a Medicaid and Medicare billable service. So there's a little difference in the way it's provided in Georgia, where in Florida, that's not the case. So that's, I think, the difference. And I would just add, as far as training, keep in mind that, and Nancy did touch upon this about the idea of listening. So oftentimes peers will go into additional training to further develop their skills, such as motivational interviewing and things like that. Learn that sort of skill, because those are great, you know, goal setting, learning how to do SMART goals and help you know, veterans and individuals with that. So or whole health action management, which actually came out of a NASHBID study, I think it was back in 2009 or 2008, where it showed that individuals with mental health illnesses who received public mental health services died on average 25 years younger than the general population. So that kind of germinated out of that to address those metabolic issues that tend to affect individuals with mental health illness. So these, and I know that Colleen is certified in the Wellness Recovery Action Plan, as am I. And then I'm going to put a little kudos out to both Nancy and Colleen for being part of a national pilot program that is now implemented, and that's Woven. And I'm gonna kind of put them on the spot, but it's a really wonderful program that they're both certified in, and they're facilitators.
Amazing. Let's hear about Woven. Well, first of all, I'm assuming that's an acronym like WHAM, Whole Health Action Plan Management. Okay. What is Woven?
So let's see. Let me get my.
You got the book handy.
I have to look at my Women's Veteran Network.
Women's Veteran Network, and Woven in VA is the official title.
Woven in VA, because this was, as I understand it, when we were trained, this program was started out in the communities. I believe it was by 2 civilian women who, I think it was like Missouri or somewhere right in the center of the Midwest, who realized that there were many more services for male veterans than female veterans. And they saw that as, I think they took it on as a challenge to create this program, which is all around the country. It's online, so anyone can go to Woven for Women Veterans and look at their page and sign up for groups. But they trained Nancy and I as facilitators last summer. So we're in our 3rd group. It's 8-week sessions, 90 minutes a piece, and we cover 8 different areas. And they're areas like trust and transition and balance and self-esteem. And, you know, I mean, it's good. And what we always, you know, what we hope for and what we typically see is the women really bonding, because we hear a lot of we don't have many friends. It's hard to connect to other women who weren't in the military, and they do connect in this group. And we encourage them to share their information with each other so that they can meet socially after the group ends or during it, and then also, you know, build up their support system. So, you know, it's really a wonderful group. The women, we've had very positive feedback on it.
It's wonderful. Thanks for putting them on the spot, David.
Anytime.
So I'm seeing that we're coming up against time here, and I'm skimming my list of questions. We might have to do a part 2 at some point. One of the things I really wanted to make sure that I asked, though, is what is the most powerful part for you of being a peer support specialist? Colleen, do you want to start with that one?
Sure. The most important part of it is being able to share my story and being able to have a connection with another veteran and inspire hope in them.
Amazing. Nancy, how about you?
It is like the same, inspire hope, making a connection, providing them a path so that their journey has a light ahead of at the end of it, that they can see something. Helps me.
Yeah. I think our camera might have frozen just a bit. We lost you for just a minute there, Nancy, just the last few things that you said.
Oh, well, I get benefits from it too. It's a two-way street for me. I provide services and help provide the hope for others, but by doing this, I can continue reevaluating my recovery or my positions. So it's as helpful to me as in me helping them. Sometimes I guess more.
Oh, wow, that is so powerful. Thank you. David, how about you?
I would say the most powerful thing of being a peer specialist is being able to walk alongside someone as they're creating a life of meaning and purpose as they define it.
Walking alongside someone and a life of meaning and purpose. That's all anybody wants in this life, right? Meaning, purpose. So say that there's a veteran out there listening to this webinar or this panel discussion, and they're wondering, like, what does this actually look like to walk into the Veterans Hospital and receive peer support? Could you share a little bit about what it looks like to receive peer support from the perspective of the person seeking out the support?
Okay, let me start on this one because I'm at the tip of the spear. I work and provide peer support in primary care. I want to talk about a wild place. So yeah, so I'm more than likely going to be somebody they're going to see right out the gate, right as they're meeting with their primary care physician. And what I do is just really just try to let them know that I'm here. Again, try to make that connection on the veteran level as well as somebody who has dealt with some things that have been able still to create a life of meaning and purpose. And the wonderful thing is from there, as they bridge out and potentially go into specialty mental health care, then they have the opportunity to meet some of the other peers that we have here. Of course, Colleen and Nancy also work very closely with and have in the past with the Women's Center that we have here, who specializes in serving our female veterans, which is definitely underserved, and grateful for their work. So, but that's where I'm at. I'm at that tip of the spear, if you will.
Great. So in that setting, would it be like the primary care physician notes that they might have expressed that they're depressed?
Oftentimes it's right then and there. I'll just get a message from the primary care physician or a nurse, such and such would like to meet with you. Oftentimes it might have to do with navigating a somewhat complex VA system, which again, if you're dealing with other issues and you're trying to access services, but you can't, that can be a real powerful source of frustration and angst for the veteran. Like Nancy, I do not have all the answers. I'm going to tell you that right now. But like Nancy and Colleen, I know where to go to get the answers. So I will walk with you and help you access the different services that you're trying to access. So that's often what I'm doing in that initial, is just letting them know that I've been there as a vet myself, and as somebody in recovery. So I've got the t-shirt. So, you know, you can kind of talk to me a little bit.
I love it. Would you add anything to that, Colleen or Nancy, what this looks like from the perspective of the person seeking out support?
I would say, like, you know, the last 2 years when we've been virtual, the majority of veterans that I work with come to me on a consult basis. So I'm reaching out to them and making a time for them. And then when we meet, I will ask them if peer services was explained to them and if they would like me to re-explain it. And they always say yes. So I do briefly. So, you know, I'm not taking up too much of their time, but they should know what it is. And I will offer, you know, we can either talk right now. Some of them feel, and I have found this, that they have a lot of different providers and it's one more appointment that at this time they don't need, and the last thing that I want to put on them is any additional stress. So at that time I will say, well, I'm here to help you navigate the system as well. If you find that you need me in the future, anytime you want to talk, you call me and we'll schedule a time. So I give them my contact information, and it may end then. If it doesn't, I'm asking those open-ended questions. You know, are you from Florida? Where are you from? What branch of the military were you in? How long did you serve? How do you like it here? What does your family look like? You know, what do you know, just bring, and they are often get very engaged, and that's when you know the commonalities come up and they see that. I tell them, I say, if you want to know about me, please just ask. If it's something that I'm not comfortable sharing at this time, I'll let you know, but you can always ask.
It's when the magic happens, right? Yeah, I love it. Nancy, would you add anything to this?
Yeah, for me, I think it's visibility.
Yeah.
Is what they see with me, and they know that they're not alone. Not just seeing female veterans, but transgender especially. There's a lot of stigma, a lot of beliefs based on what the military does and what the civilian world, and they come to the VA and they see me. I'm walking around, I've got a lanyard, and I am open about it. I do not in any way feel that I so pass that no one will ever know. They know I'm transgender. I'm willing to talk to them about it, answer questions, and I also do tell them when they're talking, is it for, ask me anything whatsoever. I'm here, you can ask me. I'll explain to you why it is not appropriate if it isn't.
Yeah.
I'm not going to just come back and say, you can't ask that. I will explain it. I will create the dialogue. I've had so many people tell me they want to help transgender, but they don't know what to say. They're afraid of saying the wrong thing. So I give them the opportunity of saying the wrong thing in a safe environment. But I think a lot of it is visibility for a lot of people, whether it's calling me for women transgender, women veterans, me for transgender or the LGBTQ plus, seeing David right there in the mix with everything. For all of us, I think it works into a lot of visibility. They see fellow veterans that are willing to say, yeah. And as they say, we start the conversation, and once they are connected through talking about their service or something, the barriers can come down. And they say, yeah, you're one of us. You know, you're one of me.
Thank you so much. This has been a fantastic conversation. You know, in honor of Mental Health Month, I mean, we should make every month is Mental Health Month, right? But May is Mental Health Month, and we wanted to put together something that would be that would serve the community. And I think educating about this topic of peer support and its power is an incredible service to the community. It really is instilling hope and letting people know that they're not alone. So I just want you three to know how much I admire what you do for your life's work. And I'm sure that the folks that you work with feel the same way. And I just want to thank you for the time you took to speak with me today and to answer these questions. I know that this particular recording of this panel discussion is going to help people better understand the power of peer support. So thank you so much.
Thank
Well,
you.
thank you for asking.
Thank you very much.